some examples of things that I've done in the round. So here you can see it's a complete tubular, goes all the way around it. And here, again using your circular needles, but using them in a different way. So this is the flat use of your circular needles to give you your extra length, because this is going to become a shawl, so it's going to be much, much wider. You wouldn't have enough room on your traditional needles. Another way in which I've used circular needles is edgings on very, very wide pieces of work. So this is on a blanket. You can see there, it's absolutely nearly impossible to get all of that length onto one needle. So you can use circular needles as traditional needles and use them for the extra length. Now, one of the hardest things with using circular needles is starting off. So here's one I prepared earlier. So here, this is going to be a hat. And I've casted on the required number of stitches from the pattern. There. Now the most important thing when you're going to join, because this is going to be in the round, which I love for hats because it means no joining up whatsoever. When you've finished, you've finished. So you've got to make sure that there's no twists at all in your stitches. If you have a twist before you join them, you can have a twist all the way up your piece and it's just going to spoil it. It's not going to look nice. So the easiest way to do this is to just basically put it out flat. And make sure that your stitch is all at the bottom. If you can see there, you stretch it out a bit, the bobbly bit is all at the bottom and your loops are at the top. So when you're quite happy that they're all in the right place, and spend time doing that because you'll regret it if you don't, you can then join them. Now you can just try and fiddle away and join them directly. But actually I find that really, really hard. You see, I've got a twist in there, but luckily I'd seen it. So what I quite often do is I'll do an extra stitch. So I've done one more stitch than the pattern's told me to do. And then I'll knit two together. So I've put one of the stitch from the end there onto the needle there. And I'm going to join these two stitches together. Make sure you don't do that, otherwise you'll end up with the yarn on the wrong side. Okay? So I've now joined them together. And it's just made it very, very easy for me to join together. Now normally I'd put a stitch marker in there because that would always show me the beginning of my round. You can tell the beginning of your round by your tail, but it's safer to pop a stitch marker in there. And then you just keep knitting. Now this is going to be, because it's going to be a hat, this would be some sort of knit and purl usually. But for my first row, I always do a knit because it stabilises your cast on stitch. You can try doing the knit one purl one, but it's much, much easier to do this and it doesn't show when you join it together. So this is knitting on 4 needles, which is another method of knitting in the round. Most common thing I think done on 4 needles is socks, where you end up with one long tube. So these have been done on 4 needles. So again, with 4 needles, as with the circulars, the most tricky thing is the cast on and joining. It always is the most difficult thing. So I've already cast on, done 60 stitches because I knit socks all the time and I always do 60 stitches for my socks. Now I cast them all onto 1 needle to begin with, and then I've split them onto 3 there. You can see they're going to join together to become a round there. And as with the circulars, I've done a knit row first because it stabilises it for me. Again, it's very important that you make sure that all these stitches here are going to be in the same place, the bottom, because you don't want you twisting it. So once I'm happy they're in the right place, I then pick them up. Okay, so here we've got them ready for me to join my two stitches around it. I'll just put my yarn in here. Okay, so this again is going to be your fiddliest bit because you're joining in your 4th needle. And basically every time you're going to have your yarn on these 3 needles and you're going to be putting them onto the 4th needle, so that will then become one of your needles and you'll have another one free. So here, I'm going to be using it here and it's going onto this needle here and it's joined. Now it's really important that you give that a bit of a yank so that it keeps it tight, especially for the first round. So we're going to be knitting across this. When we'll get to the end, you'll see what I mean about the needles. You'll notice that I'm a yarn thrower, which is a technical term for how I hold my yarn. Okay, so I've come to the end of that needle, so that is now my 4th needle, and I'll now use that to knit the next one. And you'll keep going round like that in circles as per your required pattern. Now with the 4 needles, it's easy to see where the start of your row is because your tail is at one of your needle joins. So you don't always need markers, but it depends on what you're actually making. So now we're going to look at joining another colour, as sometimes these are joined in the middle if you're doing intarsia, or sometimes at the end. So we're going to just do some stripes so you can see how the yarns would be played. So I'm going to join the red onto the cream here. And always make sure you leave yourself a nice long tail because it's easier for sewing in. So I've joined it, literally I've just knitted that first stitch, pull that so it's tight. Now depending on what yarn you're using and what you're making, you can actually bury this end as you're going along. You'd have to make a decision based on what you were doing. If you can't bury it, which I'll show you in a minute, then you leave your end and you'll sew it in afterwards. But if you're going to bury it, you'd literally keep it. As we did with the intarsia, we're picking up the stitches here. And I'm literally going in and out. If you look at what's happening with it, you'll see it's being buried underneath. So you'll see there, you can see your stitches, and on this side you can see where I've caught it all the way along. Now if I was going to bury it, I'd keep going for a little bit longer. Usually I go for between 8 and 10 stitches, but it really does depend on what you're making and how secure you need that to be. So if it's something that's going to have lots of use, I wouldn't recommend that way, but the plus side of it is it's quick and easy. So if we're going to do stripes, so I'll knit through to the end. I'm going to join on the cream again now, but if I was going to say do another 2 rows of the red and then join the cream, I might want to carry my cream up so it sort of sits evenly along the edge of my knitting. So I'll just show you how I'm going to do that. I would do that even though I'm not going to actually do it. So I would just literally pop that over there and then go around, do my stitch, and then you'll see that the cream stitch there is caught. So then if I was going to carry it up, it would already be halfway up the piece that I've knitted. But I'm not going to do that today because I'm just going to rejoin the cream and show you the stripe. There you go. You can see how the stripe's going to work there now.